Hello and welcome to the Arupe Virtual Learning Institute lesson on reading from a file and using the Java language. My name is John Maxwell. The first rule of reading from a file is to understand the file that you're reading from. And before you have a text file, yob2010.txt, and you can see it has a number of entries: name, it appears gender, and a number after it. And this is a file from the US Census Bureau cataloging all the given names in a particular year, and in this case 2010. And so we read line number one that says Isabella, a female, was a name that was given out 22,856 times in 2010. So it was the most common or most frequent um, female name for the 2010 year. And rounding out the top 10, you'd find Sophia, Emma, Olivia, Emily, Abigail, Abby, Madison, Chloe, and Mia. And you can find literally versus almost any name that you are looking for, unless it's most uncommon. And you can see obviously the little differences: Sophia down here and Sophia up here spelling differently. So, you have to be able to understand the file a little bit before you begin to use it. Another thing that's very important to understand is each of the fields, be it as it will, is separated by a comma. And this is a comma separated file. It's a delimiter. We call a comma the delimiter, marking the end and beginning of one field to another. Uh, Common delimiters are tabs and or semicolons, but really the comma seems to be the most frequently in use. So now that we understand that, we can understand that there are particular file for every single year. So in 1880, Mary was the most common, and if we scroll down, it's a little shorter, right? Obviously, Mary has 7,000 names in comparison to Isabel, which is 22. It's just a subject that our population was less in 1880, and the names were a lot different. I don't think many young women get the name Bertha anymore. So we're scrolling down, and I'm going through the best of 1880, and we get to the male names, and there it is. After all the female names, John in 1880 was the most common given name with 9,000 some odd entries. William, James, Charles, George, Frank, Joseph, Thomas, Henry. You can see significant evolution, really, in the types of names being given over the years. So you can plumb this data here for a lot of interesting things. Not only the size of the population and number of births per year, but also, you can look perhaps at demographic trends. And note that if you have like a really uncommon name, the number of instances stops at five. They don't go down two, three. So there's probably some names that are left off here. In fact, quite a few. The one offs, the ones that were like named Coaster or Lampshade, those are not appearing in the census file. Well, let's look at how to read them. Well, first you want to ask, what year do you want to read from? And you read that year in and you form a string. YOB, because all the files begin with YOB, you convert the string, the integer, that you just took in as a year to a string, and then you add the .txt so that you can access any one of these files. Then you enter the name and the gender. The reason why you enter the gender is a lot of names like Alex are both female and male, so they'd be categorized as such. So you would enter that in. It's going to be used later. And then convert it to uppercase in case your user is a little bit sloppy and just hits small m for male, then it gets converted to uppercase. And that's because they're in uppercase over in the file. So again, an observation, understand the file before you attempt to read from it. Then we open the file. And by the way, there are a couple of things. If it's not found, it throws an exception, which will shut down the program because we're not catching it, okay, in any way. And we also have imported the file and the locale, which we use in the upper case, all right, and obviously the scanner. So we create a scanner and give it the text file object, and then we say scanner.hasNext. Okay, as long as it has a next line, we're going to continue to read. And we grab the line by line, and then we split it into parts which go into a string array at the comma. Now we know that last part, which is the number of times the name is given, is not a string. We may have to deal with that later. But if we get a match of names and gender, then we'll print out that name and say how many times it appears. Let's run it. Okay, so we'll enter the year, which is 2010. And we'll enter the name we used in class last night, Dean, one of our classmates. And we'll specify the gender. Again, I'll just hit lowercase and it will be converted to uppercase. And we'll say the name Dean appeared in the 2010 census 1179, which is 1,179 times. So we'll just run it again and point out something 2010, and her name Dean. This time we'll say female, and it doesn't enter at all, so it doesn't find it. Okay, just run it again, and we'll enter the year, and we'll say the most common name in 1880, as we looked before, was John. Great. And we'll type in John for 2010, and we'll specify the gender, and it's 11,525 times. So what a fantastic thing. You can do a lot more with this if you wanted. Okay, you could open each and every file and catalog the number of times a name has been given in a particular time range. There's a lot of things to do, so consider fooling around with it a little bit. Let's go over to Eclipse, but before we do, I want to show you this, which is the quick reference. We used hasNext, okay, to run the loop. So if there's a next item to read in a file or an input source, it will read true. If not, it'll read false. But we also use next line to get the entire line from the file source. We could use any of these, next int, next double, next boolean, or next, just to read the string. But we tend to use those in reading input from the keyboard. But know that they're there and they can be used from reading from a file as well. Okay, so on to Eclipse and an example over there. In this case, we include all the libraries that we have before, and we throw a file not found exception if the file, which is foodlist.csv, is not found. That CSV stands for comma separated value. So it almost tells you in the extension how it's broken up, but let's take a look. The food list: berries, the price, the calories, the rating, and whether it contains nuts. So we're reading these in a comma separated value file, which has information about various food items. Again, open the text file, okay, using the scanner. Continue reading from it while it has a next line. Take that line and split it at the comma into a string array called parts. The first part, which we learned, was a string, berries. Okay, so that's it. The next part was the price, and we used the double wrapper class to parse out the string that's read into the parts string array, and likewise using the integer and boolean classes to convert that string element in the parts array to its original form, which would be a boolean. And we'll create a food item and then add it to our array list inventory. And you could just easily add it to an array, okay? But then you'd have to have a counter to keep track of which position in the array you wanted to add it to. So that's something. Let's take a quick look at the food item, and we realize each food item has price, name, calorie, rating, a date which it was added, okay, and contains nuts. And here is the constructor we called over here that takes these elements here as we're constructing a new food item to be added to the array list of food items. And note that if we want the date, we just go new date and it gives the current time and date. There's other ways to do it, okay? And we also notice a decimal format. I don't really care, but I kind of wanted it to have the dollar sign, a period, and the two zeros, or two positions after the decimal. So a couple of accessors: get price, get calories, and has nuts. Okay, so let's run this real quick, the menu builder, and we'll see that it read from the file properly and outputs according to plan. So everything works. This has been reading from a file, and I hope you succeed at it. The AP curriculum added it this year. It's really quite simple. I wouldn't expect any more than multiple choice questions on it in the exam. Um, However, it is, the first stepping stone to, a more enhanced skill. Obviously, data gets transferred between systems all the time. You export data and you import it into others. And also, what happens is there's lots of data that's being read by large language models. Again, another name for AI. So we're training AI on particular data, and it's important to be able to do that. One thing that I want to point out is that food.csv, the data file, is located on an equal part in the SRC folder. Okay, notice that this is a bit different. So I'm going to export this, and you can just import this project into your Eclipse if you're using that. And you should be able to also alter it a little bit and open it as a file to be able to put it into Visual Studio Code if you use that. Well, thank you very much for listening, and good luck.